I think that all of us weren't so sure how talented we were. We just knew that we had to work as hard as we could and do as much as we could to make these shows work.
There was a brief moment in Hollywood when it seemed as though William Petersen was standing on the edge of greatness. Critics admired him. Directors trusted him. His performances carried a quiet intensity that lingered long after the credits rolled. Yet somehow, while other actors of his generation became household names, Petersen followed a different path. He never chased celebrity. He never learned to play the Hollywood game. And perhaps that is exactly why, decades later, his finest work still feels remarkably fresh. For those who remember the thrillers of the 1980s, his performances remain unforgettable, not because they asked for our admiration, but because they demanded our attention. Looking back now, it's easy to assume his career simply unfolded differently than expected. But the truth is far more interesting. William Petersen possessed everything the studios claimed they wanted in a leading man: intelligence, commanding screen presence, emotional discipline, and an unmistakable authenticity. What he lacked was the one quality Hollywood often prizes above all else: the desire to become larger than life. Instead of creating a glamorous public image, Petersen devoted himself almost entirely to the craft of acting, allowing the characters to speak louder than the man behind them. Long before audiences knew his name, Petersen had already built a reputation where appearances meant nothing and talent meant everything. Chicago's theater community in the 1970s was producing a remarkable generation of actors who believed that truth mattered more than charisma. It was a demanding environment, one that rewarded patience, preparation, and complete commitment rather than instant applause. Working alongside fellow performers who would later become celebrated names in American film and theater, Petersen developed the disciplined approach that would define every stage of his career. That dedication eventually led him to the renowned Steppenwolf Theater Company, where actors were encouraged to disappear completely into their roles rather than seek the spotlight for themselves. Those years shaped not only his technique, but also his philosophy. Fame was never the objective. Honest storytelling was. When filmmaker Michael Mann cast Petersen in a small role in Thief in 1981, audiences barely noticed the newcomer. It was only a few minutes on screen, hardly enough to announce the arrival of a future leading man. But Mann noticed something others might have missed: a rare combination of intelligence, restraint, and quiet danger. It was the beginning of a creative partnership that would eventually produce one of the defining performances of the decade, while setting William Petersen on a career unlike anyone had expected. If Thief introduced William Petersen to the right director, the middle of the 1980s presented him with the opportunity every ambitious actor dreams of. In the span of just 2 years, he found himself leading 2 extraordinary films under 2 legendary filmmakers. On paper, it looked like the beginning of superstardom. Looking back today, it almost feels inevitable that Hollywood expected him to become one of its next great leading men. Yet history had other plans. In 1985, director William Friedkin handed Petersen the starring role in To Live and Die in L.A., an uncompromising crime thriller unlike anything audiences were expecting. Petersen's Secret Service agent Richard Chance wasn't courageous in the traditional Hollywood sense. He was impulsive, arrogant, and increasingly consumed by obsession. Every decision he made pushed him closer to the edge, blurring the line between lawman and criminal. Petersen never attempted to soften those rough edges. He portrayed Chance as a man whose greatest enemy was often his own pride, trusting viewers to wrestle with the character instead of asking them to like him. The performance earned enormous respect from critics and filmmakers. But admiration does not always translate into mass popularity. Moviegoers were accustomed to heroes who offered reassurance, humor, or emotional warmth. Petersen offered something very different: He brought intensity, discipline, and an unsettling realism that made Richard Chance unforgettable, but never comfortably familiar. Only a year later, Michael Mann reunited with Petersen for Manhunter, a film that would become one of the most influential psychological thrillers ever made. As FBI profiler Will Graham, Petersen delivered a performance built almost entirely on restraint. Graham wasn't fearless. He was exhausted by the darkness he confronted, haunted by the realization that understanding monsters required allowing a small part of their thinking into his own mind. Petersen conveyed that internal struggle with remarkable subtlety, revealing a man who appeared calm on the surface while quietly unraveling beneath it. Although Manhunter received only modest attention during its original release, time transformed its reputation completely. Today, it is regarded as a landmark in modern crime cinema, admired for its intelligence, atmosphere, and psychological depth. Ironically, the very qualities that have made both films endure for decades may also explain why William Petersen never became a conventional Hollywood superstar. His greatest performances challenged audiences instead of comforting them, and in doing so, they established him as something far rarer, a performer whose work only grows stronger with age. After Manhunter, many actors would have seized the momentum and pursued bigger paychecks, broader audiences, and more conventional leading roles. William Petersen could easily have followed that path. Directors respected him, critics praised him, and he had already proven that he could anchor complex, demanding films. Yet instead of reinventing himself to satisfy Hollywood's expectations, he continued making choices that reflected his own instincts rather than the industry's. Throughout the late 1980s and into the 1990s, Petersen appeared in a series of films that revealed a remarkably consistent pattern. Whether portraying the legendary Pat Garrett in Young Guns 2, exploring quiet emotional conflict in Cousins, or taking on thoughtful dramatic roles in projects like Hard Promises, he remained drawn to characters shaped by responsibility, experience, and moral uncertainty. Even when the stories themselves varied, the men he portrayed often carried the same unmistakable qualities: disciplined, intelligent, and emotionally restrained individuals who revealed their feelings through actions instead of speeches. As the years passed, that artistic consistency became both his greatest strength and his greatest limitation. While many of his contemporaries experimented with romantic comedies, action blockbusters, or larger-than-life adventures, Petersen rarely seemed interested in expanding his public image. Instead, he refined a style that had become uniquely his own. Every performance felt carefully measured, never exaggerated, never desperate to impress. There was a quiet confidence in his work, as though he believed the audience would discover the truth of a character without needing obvious emotional signals. That approach earned lasting respect inside the industry. But Hollywood often rewards versatility that can be marketed as much as it rewards excellence. Petersen was never the actor who smiled his way through talk shows, cultivated a glamorous celebrity persona, or selected projects simply because they promised blockbuster success. He seemed perfectly comfortable allowing others to dominate magazine covers while he focused on becoming better at the craft itself. Looking back now, it's difficult to see those choices as missed opportunities. They appear instead as deliberate decisions made by an artist who understood exactly what mattered to him. William Petersen wasn't chasing the widest possible career. He was building one defined by integrity, patience, and authenticity. In the long run, that may have cost him some of Hollywood's brightest spotlights, but it preserved something even more valuable: the complete trust of audiences who admired actors not for their fame, but for the honesty they brought to every role. By the turn of the new millennium, the landscape of Hollywood had changed. Adult crime dramas were becoming less common, blockbuster franchises were beginning to dominate theaters, and many actors from Petersen's generation found themselves searching for a new direction. For William Petersen, that direction arrived in an unexpected place, not on the big screen, but on television. When he accepted the lead role in CSI Crime Scene Investigation in 2000, some observers viewed the decision as a step backward. At that time, television still carried less prestige than feature films. But Petersen understood something that others did not. Great storytelling wasn't defined by the size of the screen. It was defined by the quality of the character. As forensic scientist Gil Grissom, Petersen finally found a role that seemed perfectly tailored to everything he had spent decades developing as an actor. Grissom was brilliant without arrogance, calm under pressure, and endlessly curious about the smallest details others overlooked. More importantly, he possessed a quiet humanity that audiences had only occasionally glimpsed in Petersen's earlier film work. There were subtle moments of dry humor, genuine compassion for his colleagues, and an understated warmth that made the character feel approachable without sacrificing intelligence. The success that had narrowly escaped Petersen during his film career arrived on an extraordinary scale. CSI became one of the most watched television dramas in the world, reaching millions of viewers every week and inspiring an entire franchise. Behind the scenes, Petersen also served as an executive producer, giving him creative influence and long-term stability that many film stars never experience. Perhaps that was the greatest irony of his career. Hollywood spent years searching for a way to turn William Petersen into a traditional movie star. Yet it was television that finally recognized exactly who he was. Rather than asking him to change, CSI allowed him to remain authentic, and audiences embraced him for it. By succeeding on his own terms, Petersen achieved something even more enduring than stardom. He earned a place in television history. Today, William Petersen's career looks very different from the one many people predicted 40 years ago, and perhaps far richer because of it. Rather than measuring his success by blockbuster box office numbers, it is now measured by influence. His performances in Manhunter continue to be rediscovered by new generations of filmmakers and film lovers, while CSI Crime Scene Investigation remains one of the defining television dramas of the 21st century, still attracting viewers through streaming platforms around the world. Now in his early 70s, Petersen has chosen a life far removed from Hollywood's spotlight. He has long maintained strong ties to his hometown of Chicago and its theater community, preferring privacy over celebrity. Married to his wife Gina Cerrone for more than 2 decades, he has largely kept his family life out of public view. These days, there are no headlines about scandals or desperate attempts at a comeback. Instead, William Petersen enjoys something many actors never achieve: the freedom to let his work speak for itself. His legacy isn't built on fame alone, but on honesty, discipline, and unforgettable performances that have stood the test of time. In the end, perhaps that was always the career he wanted. Not the loudest voice in Hollywood, but one of the most respected.